And that's what she said, and I was like, listen.
Okay. So whenever, so whenever you guys want to talk, just make sure to. Okay. All right, how you guys feeling today? You guys all right? I'm doing good. I'm doing good. All right. This is It's All Subjective. Excuse me, I said podcast. It's a panel discussion focused on moving the community forward through our personal endeavors. This is the last panel, so can you guys give a round of applause? That's fire, right? That's fire. I've done two panels previously. The first one was, the topic was, is social media the modern day resume? The one I did last month was, is nightlife here getting worse, or are we just getting older? And this one today is building community more important than networking. So the basis of this panel is pretty much just to kind of just challenge you thinking outside the box. Just try to figure out how we can discuss topics that are near and dear to us and our community. So I'm very thankful for everybody being here. I mean, this is as far as like all the panels that I've done, this is kind of like the biggest group. So this is actually pretty fire. Shout out to you guys. But this one is really important to me because when I first moved to Seattle, I didn't know necessarily what my community was. But I felt that as I've thrown events and put things together and been a part of each and every one of these panelists' community, I was able to discover my own. So I'm very thankful, very grateful for you guys being here and just being willing to share your insight today. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and give the panelists the opportunity to kind of introduce yourselves, and we'll kind of get started from there. So we can play popcorn whichever way you want to start it, but we can start from left to right, middle, whatever. But
There we go. All right. How y'all doing? Good evening. My name is Anthony Kerr. I am, I guess, the founder of the Collective Seattle. Now, not to confuse y'all, there's another collective in South Lake Union down the street. We're the Black Collective. And it's essentially a community of approximately 4,000-ish young professionals of color, primarily people between 22 and 35, about 60% women, mostly people who've moved here from work, so they're primarily from elsewhere. We also have some original Seattle people as well. But yeah, and yeah, that's cool.
I just want to call out that Anthony was holding it like it's like he out here rapping. I just have to call that out.
Sometimes that's the best way to do it, you know?
Hi, my name is Angelina Howard. I am the president of the Black Employee Network, or BEN at Amazon. And I'm also the co-founder of the Socialite Seattle. So if you heard about hip hop trivia, that is us.
Aloha, everyone. My name is Sage Kealohilani Quiamno. I am the co-founder of Future for Us, a 7,000 growing community of women of color professionals. We launched in June, just finished up a national roadshow in 7 cities, and fucking trying to kill it out here. I moved here 6 years ago, and Seattle is still predominantly white. And how do we build POC communities, but also focus it in professional development and focusing on the most marginalized, which is women of color, Black women, etc. So wanted to build community that is ambitious and someone like myself and women of color. So grateful to be here. Thank you, Anthony, for putting this together, because every single person on this panel I've been inspired by. Last year, I went to my first Laid Back Allure event at the Cloud Room, if anybody has remembered. And I've never seen so many stylish, wealthy, like bougie POCs in one area on Capitol Hill ever. So I said, hey, if you could create this, maybe I could create this for women of color professionals. So again, thank you so much for being here.
I guess I have 2 mics.
Sorry.
Hello. Let's go. Hello, my name is Avi. I'm co-founder of Seattle Gents, which is basically a menswear community. So if you're a man or woman and you love fashion, we host events. We work with brands just to highlight Seattle fashion and lifestyle. So, I mean, I guess that's what we do.
And I've also forgot to mention earlier that the audio and video is being recorded. There's a camera right over here, and there's also a camera right there. So I forgot to mention that. You know, I forgot to mention that. But fortunately, you guys are here. But for those that won't be here, they'll be able to stream this both on YouTube, and it'll be also available on the Cognac Small Talk podcast series that I have. So if you don't know about it, you should go check it out, right? Usually what I do for my panels, I always have history with the panelists that I have on. And I like to, they kind of talk humbly about themselves, but I'm like the type of person, I like to gas up my friends. I like to, you know, talk to my friends and be able to like hype them up in their, the spaces that they own. So I want to go ahead and start off with Anthony Kerr. When I first moved to Seattle, the collective was actually the first community that I was a part of. And, you know, the narrative was always like, hey, there's not a lot of people of color in Seattle. But then I came into the collective, and the way that it formed was because I never used group chat. Group me or, it was group me first. And then after it's changed over to Slack. And I've never used any of those platforms to be able to communicate with people. But the way that he was able to do that so flawlessly and be able to get so many people that were transplants or people that were born and raised in Seattle, all to be communicating through Slack and GroupMe was incredible. So I've always tipped my hat, and I appreciate you for doing that, because that kind of inspired me to continue to do what I was doing in Atlanta and bring it over to Seattle. So I thank you for that. For Angelina, you know, I met you through the collective, but what was cool about you was that, you know, you're a product manager at Amazon, and, you know, for some time, probably couple years ago, that's when tech started really to become cool. And I was always one of those people where like, man, I don't really want to worry about technology and all that type of stuff when I'm socializing with my friends. But then when I came to one of the events that you were doing, I started realizing that there was a lot of people that was in tech that looked just like me, and we hang out, we go crazy on the weekends and stuff, and we have a good time. So it made me feel like a little bit more comfortable in my space, you know, just because I could be in tech and I could still turn up with people that look like me and also do it with the purpose. So I'm appreciative for you for doing that. For Sage, you know, I know we kind of talked about this on our podcast, but what you've been able to do with your Future for Us and being able to bring women together that are unrepresented in the workspace, I commend you 100%, because I know that I'm a ally for the women and all the women that are doing their thing. But for you and your co-founder to be able to do that and make it happen like that, I really appreciate you doing that, because now I'm seeing that you're doing all these tours and you're doing amazing things. I'm just very, you know, humbled and thankful for you to take out some time to be here. And then my guy, Avi, I think we kind of moved here probably a month or two apart, but then I remember that you contacted me through social media and you were looking for ways to kind of like connect and kind of bring this men's lifestyle fashion community to life in Seattle, because at that time there wasn't one. And for us to be able to, remember we met at Nordstrom in Bellevue, we got some coffee, we were just chopping it up. We were able to have a good conversation about fashion. It was really, really dope. So for me to be able to come to the 3-year anniversary of you doing that with Antonio, I tip my hat, man. So I appreciate you for doing that and bringing that community forward. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So for those that haven't been to my panels or you've streamed it or whatever, I always have 4 types of questions. First ones are going to be general. This is for the sake of the panel. I got to ask these questions just so that way you can kind of get a little bit of an understanding of what these people do. I have the thoughtful questions, meaning that I put a little bit more thought and emphasis into the specific question that I asked. I got the random questions, meaning that although I sent you guys a list of things that I would be talking about, there is absolutely no way you could have even studied for this question, which is cool. It's, you know, I like it. And it throws you a little curveball, you know? And subjective, meaning that there is no right or wrong answer to this question. It's just a question to kind of stir up some discussion, all right? So we'll go ahead and get started. Is building community more important than networking? Now, some people may have looked at this topic. I kind of talked about this on my IG story today. Some people was in my DMs going, oh, well, isn't that really the same thing? Like, oh my gosh, really? Why? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Does anybody have any type of, I guess, comment that they want to say, or do they think that it's the same thing? Do they think it's building a community is a little bit more important, or networking, or what are you guys' thoughts on that per se? And feel free, by the way, if you want to have your voice recorded or anything. No? Yeah, sure. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah.
All right. So can everybody hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right. I would say that building community is more important than networking. And the reason for that is twofold. One, I think that when you are going into a relationship with the expectation of networking, that's a transaction, right? There's no real way to know what that person's kind of how they're approaching it, what their ulterior motives are. But then I also think that when you're focused more on building community, you have the ability to really talk through whatever gaps that you may have, or if there's a resource or an asset that I think there was a guy I follow that I think used to live here in Seattle, Tim, Mr. Future at Work, like, and he talked about resources versus assets, right? And I would say that if you are networking, that you are utilizing a person as a resource as opposed to building community and leveraging your assets. And so I feel like when you go into something trying to figure out how to connect with somebody, that you should always come at it from the basis of wanting to build that genuine like relationship, and that's how you build your village, and that's how you build your community.
Absolutely. I agree. Yeah, Nikita, go ahead. Yeah.
I agree with Ish. I think, however, I think they're equally important, but I think that by building community, you build the capacity to network. So like my job, or what I love to do, obviously, is to create community by connecting folks, and by connecting folks and building community, you allow people who may not have anything to offer you in a professional sense of networking, but I can connect myself and Sage, or Sage and Angelina, who might not know each other, by building this community. And now they're two like-minded folks that are in the same field or have never met each other, by building a community that's for everyone. So you don't have to always, like, networking doesn't always only happen at a networking event. Like, networking happens organically when you're able to create community where we can come and be ourselves and share, and then you never know what other people are doing, what it is that you're doing.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you got a network, and now you got hella net worth. So like, that's all you need.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah. I go ahead. I'll bring it to you.
So I just want to say my 2 cents. I want to piggyback off what she's saying. Angelina, I haven't met you. I work at Amazon, doing work right now.
I literally saw that laptop. I'm like, that looked like an Amazon laptop.
I'm grinding right now.
Put that laptop up.
And I want to commend you for like the Ben. Ben is awesome. And piggybacking off what y'all were both saying, like, I think it's necessary to create a community as a platform for people to then network. Like, Amazon's a big company. I hope I don't get fired for this. But I don't think that there's a Black presence at Amazon. Amazon's for everybody. It's very, very diversity inclusion. I get that. But you building this community has a platform now for me and other people like me to kind of step up towards, and like have we might be dev or might be in marketing, but we all kind of unite from that one basis. And I think it strengthens the networking that we're able to then move forward with. So yeah, thank you.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah. Anybody else want to say anything on this topic? Yeah, I've always pretty much kind of agree with everybody from what they've kind of said. I've always looked at networking as kind of doing it for self. You kind of, it's like that transaction, you know, and then community or building community although it includes the networking, you're doing it for a different purpose. You're doing it to kind of bring like-minded people together, so that way other people that join that community can network amongst each other. So I like that. So the first general question is, first of all, none of these people are from Seattle, which is kind of cool. It's amazing. Two of the people actually work corporate. Two of the people don't work corporate anymore. So this is kind of one of those questions that I wanted to kind of piggyback off of. And coincidentally, the two people that don't work corporate or work corporate have separated themselves from being able to, half of the side is non-corporate, the other people are corporate. So interesting, right? Honestly,
I was like, wait a minute.
I just now thought about that, but just now looking at it, I'm just seeing it, right? But the question is it tougher to build community while working a full-time job due to the amount of time and effort put forth? Or is it easier to build a community due to the amount of resources available when you work corporate? For me, just to kind of give you guys a little bit of an example, I work a 9-to-5 job, for sure. It's a little bit more flexible than other people's 9-to-5 jobs may be. But I feel like sometimes if I was in the position of being, maybe well off or having a really, really good savings, that if I was not in that 9-to-5 job and I could just solely focus on building community, I would be doing a hell of a good job. I feel like, I'd be fucking it up, you know what I'm saying? I'd be doing an amazing job. But then I also look at it when I'm in my 9-to-5 job or I'm working in the office or working from home, I always feel like I'm just wasting my time sometimes just because I'm super passionate about the stuff that I'm doing outside of work versus what I'm actually doing in the office. But then also some people may look at it if you're working in corporate, like for example, for you, Angelina, the community that you built within Amazon, but then you also have done and built a community that's outside of that working space as well. So I'm just kind of curious just to figure out what your thoughts are or what you guys' thoughts are when it comes down to building community based off the spaces that you currently occupy.
So I'm going to start with good answers. It depends. And I say that because like for a lot of people showing up to their 9-to-5, they actually show up and their community is there. And for people like us, we show up to our 9-to-5, we feel like we are others or not a part of the community that is at our workplace. So then we either have to step out and join something or begin from scratch. So thankfully, in 2019, stepping out and join something is not that hard. Like you meet up, you can find whatever place that you like, and there's probably people that like similar things to you there. But if you're building from scratch, then there's like steps in the process. Like you got to find people, you got to find the people that are like your people or like-minded, and you also have to give them a reason to connect with each other because like not everyone sees that when they first meet people. It's like, who are you? So building from scratch is difficult, but if you have the privilege to show up to your 9-to-5 and that 9-to-5 is your community, then that's seamless. That's easy.
Yeah, that's a good point. Good point.
I'll just preface this with saying I did not see the questions that you sent.
Oh no, see, so I sent questions that were gonna be around what I was going to ask, but I didn't give you the questions that I was going to exactly ask.
I don't even think I read any email that you sent. I'll be honest. So it's
wow,
hashtag product life. It's rough sometimes.
I put some time and effort into that.
Honestly and truly, I think about it in a couple of different ways. I definitely enjoy building community, especially in terms of being Black in tech. And I remember I got to a point where I wanted to do that full time. I'm like, should I go to the diversity inclusion office? Should I move more into a PM program manager role within diversity? And I made the decision not to because sat down with someone and she's like, you have to understand the position that you are in. You are a Black product manager. So if you think about Black in tech, if you remove yourself from that, now who can look to you and be like, oh, I can do that too? She's like, you're in a way, by you being a product manager at Amazon, you're already helping your community in that sense because people can see that it's possible and you can continue to learn and build people up as you grow. So I was like, okay, then I'm going to make sure that I continue to build a community within Ben. I'm not going to take myself from this path because I love being a product manager, but I care about my community. And it does get difficult, especially leading an organization that's not just in Seattle, but we have 15 corporate offices globally. So we have offices in South Africa, England, Costa Rica. And it's hard when you're like, how do I do my job and make sure that I launch things on time, but don't forget about the people that are depending on me. And the way that Ben has grown over the years is that it's not just internal people, it's external people also, like, what has Ben doing for the community? What are you guys going to have this? So it's those pressures, and at times I'm like, I can't do this. It's too much. But when you're passionate about it, it doesn't feel like work. And honestly, Ben is another job, but I treat it as a business, but I don't feel like I can't do it, or if I don't do this, what's going to happen? I'm passionate about it, so I'm going to make it work. I'm going to figure something out, or I can figure out to make sure I delegate, but make sure I can still have my hand on it for a little bit. You know, I'm like, I'll let you do this, but what's happening? So for me, it's definitely difficult doing it internally because you still have your job. And I would tell people, like, listen, I can't do this right now because if I get fired, I can't do Ben. I have to have my job.
Yeah.
So I make sure that I prioritize, but it's because I'm passionate about it. And luckily, I'm also very vocal with my manager and like, listen, I'm the president of Ben. I'm going to go do this over here. I'll get my job done. And luckily, I've been very fortunate to have people in leadership who also appreciate and understand the work that I'm doing. Outside of it, with the Socialites of Seattle, I've had to be realistic with myself and understand that I can't be a PM at Amazon, president of Ben, and also throw X, Y, and Z events in addition to things at Amazon as well. So we do hip hop trivia, but I notice that I can't do it all. And I think that's another thing that we, especially as community builders, is making sure that we don't burn ourselves out. As passionate as you can be, you can't do it all. So that's what I've learned, and it's kind of finding that balance. So I think to Anthony's point, it definitely depends. It does help working internally when you have a budget, so that helps. Yeah. It's lovely. But yeah, so that's what I've learned and how I figure out the balance between them.
For myself, I am an ex-Amazon employee, and I worked at a couple of startups. Yeah, it's been a crazy ride, but I think, number one, I commend people who have their own side hustle, community building, because I think just as POCs, it's ingrained in our fucking blood to be not only doing our jobs, but building community for ourselves, because we don't see ourselves within our own positions. Like, that is huge. I mean, how many of you guys have your own brands or companies here? Some of you guys. Okay, everybody should be raising their hands because every single person has a brand. You are a brand. Like, you are a brand. It is definitely fact. And when we talk about, whether, what, if I work in corporate and I have a side hustle, you can do both, right? It is definitely capable. It depends on who you are, what is your communication style, what is your flexibility, how do you work as a person? I just knew that as a young, like a 28-year-old woman, I'm Native Hawaiian, Filipino, Chinese, and working for a women's organization, I'm tired of weak, mediocre leadership. I'm done. I am absolutely done. So that's the fire that fuels me, because I know, because women of color, number one, are 3-4% of the C-suite levels in corporate boards. There is literally one woman of color, a Black woman, who is the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. There are more men named John CEOs and more blonde women CEOs than there are POCs and women of color. Like, that is disturbing facts. That's why there's a max exodus of women of color leaving corporate environments, because we don't see ourselves running leadership, nor there are pathways to power. So that's why there's so many, Black women, number one, and women of color are the fastest growing entrepreneurs in this country every year. Today, equal Latina, equal pay day. Shop Latina X just launched the first marketplace of Latin-owned businesses. Holy shit. And this woman has been driving Uber for 5 years and has been steadily working on this. But now she quit her gig economy job and now has launched the first ever curated Latinx marketplace, online marketplace. So when we're talking about whether, what works for you guys, because I'm all about you guys and what is your takeaways, it depends on, what are you trying to build, how much time and funding that's gonna take, and do something that's worth it for you, right? Because some of us don't come from wealth. Some of us don't come from a fucking Ivy League school network, right? So when you talk about like Harvard Business School, you already have the top Ivy League school networks that have wealth. So of course you're gonna have an uncle who's gonna give you a 50K check to start your business. I didn't. I literally had to grind teeth and nails. I have pitched over 250 people and also companies to fund Future for Us. That's how much I'm dedicated to doing the work. But I understand that, you know, a lot of the startup community in Seattle, they're like, if you're not doing this full time, then you don't care. And I think that's bullshit because number one, as POC, you gotta you have bills to pay. And that is definitely a false judgment, I feel, when we are putting pressure on people who are building communities, building organizations, companies. So I think number one is to analyze what is your capacity, how much funding do you really are able to get, but also understanding what is your why, right? Like why? Because this shit is hard. Like what Anthony said, I mean, 11 months into my company, we done roadshows, multiple sold out events, you know, Forbes, GeekWire, all that shit, right? It's cool to have the accolades, but guess what? You're gonna sacrifice a lot of personal time. It's gonna be a lot of sacrifices, a lot of resources. And I think when we're talking about, is it tougher building versus working full-time or not, is understanding, you know, what is your capacity and what are you willing to sacrifice? If you're willing to sacrifice a lot, go for it. But I really commend these two who are still working their 9 to 5, getting that money, and then also doing excellent in their own brands. Like Anthony, when you put your events, you don't even look like you're sweating. He's like, you don't even look stressed. And I'm over here doing an event, and I'm over here like crying, like with my Adderall pills, being like, oh God. And he's like, just, you know, just like, just smooth. I'm like, what the fuck, man? Like, aren't you like stressed? He's like, no, it's cool. I'm like, what? So I think, again, because I have to respect, like, number one, like we are a new organization, a new community, and I respect every single, even people in this audience who have helped me build my own community. And I want to give, you know, even people who are Seattle born and bred, you know, our work is being is successful because of the other people before us. And I always want to credit the people before us, you know, before I, you know, talk about my own shit. So yeah, that's it. I can go on a rant, so thanks.
Well, I don't have too much to add because I think you guys basically summed everything up. I guess I would agree that it's mostly on time and capacity. I have been in that position where I was doing a 9 to 5, juggling that and like I moved here 3 years ago. I was working 9 to 5 and I was brand new in the city and I was trying to grow community. I think it challenges you a little bit more and puts you in a position to really push yourself. And then the one thing that I would, I guess, mention that maybe a lot of people don't think about is like once you do finally quit your 9 to 5 job and you're doing your business full time, you don't want it to become something where it's another job, right? So like you're doing your passion on the side and you know, you're grinding it out, but then it can easily fall into doing things that are similar to what you were doing at your 9 to 5, right? So I was thinking about that. But yeah, I mean, it just gets tiring to have to juggle both. And even if you do have resources at your job to build the community, I think there's not everyone's there to help you. Like you kind of have to figure out stuff on your own. So I don't think it's like everything to have resources available. So you kind of have to like learn as you do.
I want to piggyback off of that. Now, for both you and Sage not having a corporate job, do you guys ever feel like it's getting stressful or funds are getting low to the point that you want to go back into corporate world and still build that community?
I don't know. I think I have a specific situation that helps me through that. Before I quit my job, I made sure that financially I was okay. So I had a little bit of room. So I have coverage and I'm basically, so I don't have to really worry about that. More so it's really worrying about growing the business and getting it to the level that I want to get and hitting my own goals. I guess I'm focusing on that. Sorry, what was the last part of the question?
I said, would you ever get to the point where you would want to go back into corporate and still build?
Yeah, I think about it sometimes. I think it's really, again, specific to my situation, I'm doing marketing stuff now, and my background's finance and consulting. So I don't have those like core foundational skills in marketing, and it can be a little bit challenging sometimes because it's all new to me. I've really only learned what I've done by doing my own business. Yeah. So like that's the one thing I would think about is like going back to corporate so I can really learn those core skills that you don't get in entrepreneurship.
Yeah. What about you, Sage?
The grass is always greener. The grass is always greener. So you are going to decide whether or not being at a 9 to 5 and you're bored, you're overworked, whatever, right? No matter what, either side, you have your own company, you're going to be fucking grinding. You're going to be grinding Saturday, Sunday, literally you have no vacation. Okay. So I think understanding is that, but I would never trade it in the world because I'm working like that at Amazon, but for somebody else. I get to say that my fruits of my labor are my own. It's mine. And I get to say that I built this out of nothing, right? Like my fail-safe plan is to move back home in Hawaii and sell mangoes in the back of a truck. Like, fuck it. Like on a beach.
Yeah.
It ain't. And I have my family to love me. I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's a pretty good time. Some people, I mean, Mark Zuckerberg is doing that right now. And if everybody's doing that, they want to buy a bunch of land in Hawaii. Like everybody wants to resort back to the farmland, right? Once you become a billionaire, then you retract back to that simple life. So for me, that kind of drives me is that I have all the opportunity in the world. Yeah, it'd be fun to be like a community manager at a space and do you only make maybe like less than 50K and you have your health insurance and it's good, right? But like, why don't you become something great? You know, we have our ancestors have got us to this point and survived so much.
Facts.
Why not swing? Like, why not swing for it? You know, I think that's the biggest thing that motivates me is that, you know, I don't see any other choice but to start my company because that's how far I'm fed up of like every manager meeting saying I'm intimidating or like you're doing these panels, like why are you doing this? Like as women of color, especially if your company sees that you're shining, you know what I mean, outside the company, it's kind of a threat. So I want every POC person and every person in this room to know, because it would be irresponsible for me to tell you to do your job and do your own brand, but be careful, right? Be careful and cognizant about how big your brand is growing outside of your company, because sometimes companies see that as a threat. And for me, it's like I'm done with that. And sometimes I fantasize about just being a barista, like just making coffee for folks, because that seems very simple. But like I love hard work, and I love seeing the change that I see it in my community that I serve. Women of color who are like, yeah, no, I asked for 250K. You know what I mean? Like, holy shit. Now she's financially secure to take care of her family and do well. And that's the stuff that drives me and keeps me away from being like, I want to do a 9 to 5.
Yeah. Agree on that. How many people currently use LinkedIn? Wow, that's a lot. That's good though. That's good. I told myself I wouldn't bring up too much statistics, but I kind of just wanted to bring these statistics up for the sake of the panel. But a lot of people, 85, I do my research. 25% of professionals do not network. 85% of jobs are filled through networking. 41% of professionals wish they had more time to network. And I kind of want to get a little bit, I was telling myself, I was like, the story that I'm about to actually kind of roughly go through, or briefly go through, excuse me, I was debating on whether I wanted to cut this out in the audio and video that I shared and just make it for the people that are here. I'm still debating on it, but anyways, I'm going to share it. So this is just something that I've never actually spoke about publicly. But there was one of the first times I actually got a job in tech. It was with a consulting firm back in Atlanta. And I'm not going to say the exact name of the company, but in order for them to give me the job, they had told me that they were like, well, you got to delete your LinkedIn in order to get this job, right? I was really naive at this time because I didn't do enough research, but I went ahead and signed a contract saying that, yeah, I would delete my LinkedIn. because I was super money hungry, and I was like, I'm just gonna do this, you know? So the contract was saying like, yeah, you know, you can work here and do all this, that, and the third. You get a good amount of money. You work for us for about 3 years, and after 3 years, we'll relinquish the contract. We'll get rid of it, and you can kind of work wherever. I was looking at it like, shit, I got a job for 3 years. I don't got to worry about nothing, but I'm still making a lot of money, right? That's when I realized that when I was talking to a lot of other people, I realized that it was a scam. And at that point, I didn't know how to get out of this so-called contract. So I realized they used a scare tactic on me to kind of like get me to stay with them and kind of work for them and all that type of stuff. And it was, you know, me, I'm a social person. I'm online. If you follow me on social media, I'm somebody, I like to be all around. I like to try to build networks both in person and online. And at this point, before I deleted my LinkedIn at that one point, I had a whole bunch of connections. I had a whole bunch of people working in tech, working in finance, working in marketing, working in media, whole bunch of people that I had worked so hard to kind of build their connections, because a lot of these people, you know, it's not like on Facebook and Instagram or Twitter where it's like, I don't really know you, but I'm gonna follow you. Some of these people on LinkedIn are like, you know, if I truly don't know you, we haven't connected for a specific reason, I'm not gonna add you to my network, you know? And I had worked very hard to build those networks. I had about, I think I was like 500 plus on LinkedIn and stuff. But when I was doing the research, that kind of reminded me like, man, I should probably share this story, because then I looked at this statistic. It was like 51% of the people, professionals, are without LinkedIn profiles. So it made me okay, well, now that I'm building, at least I'm a part of this big group of people that have really good jobs, but they don't have LinkedIns. But then also I looked at it too, where only 1% of the profiles have more than 500 connections. And at that one point, I was like, okay, well, great, I was a part of that 1%, but I could still coexist with the 11% of people that have more than 100. I think I got like 121 or something. Not that the number matters, but I just realized that, you know, the community that I built outside of LinkedIn was very, very important and kind of pushed me forward into getting out of that situation. So I say that all to say, also do your research before you get onto these jobs, because a lot of these people will use this as a scare tactic to kind of get you to sign something. And
Sorry that happened to you.
Yeah.
They're preying on young POC folks.
Okay, sorry. That was sorry about that. But yes, it was very, my mom was super, you know, she was going crazy. But I got out of that situation, so we're good. But we got out of that situation, but we're good. But that's really the reason why I kind of even bolded this, just because it was like, man, I deleted my LinkedIn, you know? So that's probably pretty much the only time I'm gonna actually bring up those type of statistics. I wanna make this panel more about open discussion. I want people to kind of chime in and interrupt me if you need to, but that's pretty much the only time I'm gonna actually bring up statistics for the rest of this panel. Second question. When was the moment that made you realize you needed to create a community that was specific to what you were passionate about? Now, I know you guys may have answered this a little bit when you guys either gave your introduction or the previous question, but if you guys have anything specific that you want to add to this question, feel free to go ahead and do so. Anybody can go ahead and start, yeah.
All right, I'll rock with it. So I moved to Seattle 6 years ago, 2013. My first day here was to find somewhere to live. I knew 2 people here. Their names were Eric and Ravina. And by my second weekend, I realized there was nothing for us here. So in 2 weekends, I knew a handful of people, and the types of things that I would like to do in the DC area, where I moved here from, were unknown to the people that I was connected with. And not only that, those people didn't have enough connections within the city to either create or find or obtain whatever I was looking for. So my second weekend, I decided to literally collect strangers and put them in a group chat and make them be friends. this took it took a long time because well, you find the people and then you have to convince them that you're not a strange serial killer and you actually belong to the same community. And the work in building a community is not necessarily finding the people, but getting them to believe in the vision and believe in each other and believe in the people who are in the community. Because if somebody walks up to you right now, is like, hey, I'm going to connect you with this group via email. Like, oh, here's another email, the conversation I have to manage. Like, your level of interest to just enter into random conversations with strangers is relatively low. As a millennial, as someone who lives in Seattle, as someone in 2019, we generally don't want a whole lot of friends anymore for whatever reason. So the building comes in making people see and making people believe and enabling the people to take ownership of the community. So they feel like they are receiving a contribution, have the ability or the capability and the responsibility to deliver value to the community. And that's how you, in this, over a long course of time, build it up from scratch. Answer it? Cool.
I think about this question in two parts. So there's the Ben story, and then there's the socialite story. But I moved to Seattle 5 years ago, and I didn't know anyone. And it actually was because of Ravina, who he mentioned is how I really got tapped into the collective. But for that about 6 month span, that's when a lot of things started happening, especially with Mike Brown. And I didn't have anybody to talk to about those things. Like, I had friends at work, but I didn't have any friends that looked like me. And just talking to my friends back home over the phone, that's not the same. Yeah. So I realized that I needed a community because I felt like I'm going into a space, honestly, a white space alone. And while they may like, oh, that's so sad that that happened, they didn't identify it, especially the way that I identify with it. I'm from St. Louis. Like, my dad, like I had a time in my life where I lived in Ferguson. So to think about that and no one understands the things that I felt, I'm like, I need a community. And it got to a point where I wouldn't say that I was depressed, but it was like, how can I stay here? I don't know anyone to deal with the things I'm dealing with. I don't know where to get my hair done. I literally went to multiple places. I went to Tacoma and I was like, I don't like how they do my hair out here. This is not going to work, to the point where I'm like, now I need my hair done. I got to go home. I can't find a place to do my nails. So they want to charge me like $60 and they're not even that good. I can't find food. I'm like, so this is I have a problem. I don't know where to find anything. And I don't have people that I can talk to about serious things that's going on in my life. I work in tech, and being Black in tech, especially then, I would go days without seeing somebody look like me, whether it's a Black woman or a Black man. So when I met Ravina, it was kind of a aha moment, like, finally. But then I started to realize that if I want to see other Black people, it was usually, oh, you got to go to the club. If you know me, I'm like, cool, we can go out, but I'm tired. I'd rather do something during the day. Like, what can we do? Yeah. So that's really where the socialites came up, was like, how can we get people who want to get out and meet people, but they don't want to meet people in the club? It's too loud. Yeah. The music, you can't immediately meet someone, or you're like, hey, you gonna be friends? Like, no, like, why? Stop talking to me. You gonna dance? Like, no, I don't want to dance. I just want to talk. So that's what really creep. That's where the socialites really came from, is how can we have events that span a range of people and bring them together? So we had brunches, we had an artist showcase, we did Party for Change. So it's how can we get people together that just want to meet and commune, but don't want to necessarily do it in the club or do it going out and drinking. So when we did have like parties, we did day parties. Like, we're literally like a daytime organization. So we took that and saying, okay, this is cool, but how can I take this into Ben? And I think it was actually Anthony, when you were the director of the social committee. It was called social committee back then. I know my stuff. Don't play me, Anthony. And you're like, why don't you do stuff for my committee? And I'm like, all right. And I ended up running for the networking director. Anthony was gone. I didn't take Anthony's spot. And it was a lot of, okay, there's things that I wish that Amazon was doing, Ben was doing. And you have to take a step back and say, there's things that I wish was happening. I can't just sit and be like, wow, I wish someone would throw a party that's during the day. I wish there's a brunch. I wish Amazon threw these type of things. And I remember talking to Ravina, who was the president back then, and she's like, well, you do it. She's like, you can't just sit back and be like, I wish someone did something. Put action behind it. You like doing it, so do it. And that's really the thing that I want everyone to take away from that is, if you wish that there's something in Seattle that's happening, which all of us, I feel like, have said, you can do it yourself. So build the sense of community that you want, and other people will likely want it too. And that's the big thing that I took from doing the Socialites and Ben. And I took Ben a step further. We had a lot of things internally, but how can I also make sure that people have a community outside of it? So we had the cross-company holiday party that was ideated from me stepping into the director role and saying, hey, like, we should do more things with the companies. We had the gala, and it's important for me that Amazonians know that I know that we can't all have our community internally. Great, we're all friends, but people need a community outside of that too. And I'm not afraid of having stuff with other companies. If you want to work at Microsoft, I'm not gonna be like, we can't partner with Microsoft because they may take our employees. They can go if they want to go. Ben's not helping you. And I don't think that any company should fear working with each other because we're going to steal each other's employees. If I want to go to Google, I can find a way to Google if I would need to. So I think it's important that we work together and understand we have a community internally and externally, but also making sure that we know that you can put on an event if you want to see it. And I tell people within Ben too, is like, the board can put on so many events, but literally, please come talk to me because I don't want to plan everything. So if you want to have an event, come talk to us. I will gladly help you get that event off the ground. So whenever you guys see something that you want in your community, literally go do it, or find people who can be gatekeepers to help you push that through. And believe me, people love to just be like, sure, here, thank you so much. Do it. Don't wait for anybody else to do it.
Oh.
And I'm sorry, I feel like I went on a tangent.
No, it's awesome. I'm over here like, yes.
Okay.
Awesome. I think, to be frank, I was tired of going to women's professional networking groups and being like the only one of color there. I sat down to a Latino girl as a lean-in event, and I was like, yo, I think we're the only ones who are like women of color. She's like, yeah, what the fuck is this shit? So literally, after that, because I am so obsessed with knowing who are the community leaders in Seattle, what are the kind of events that they're having, what venues, what sponsors, what are they doing, what's the programming like, because community is so hard to find sometimes in Seattle, in the city. It is there, but you really got to intentionally put yourself out there and also peel away that kind of like that exterior of passive aggressive behavior, etc. And I was tired of going to women's events, and it only being white women. So that's when I decided, when I was going across country doing salary negotiation classes, I was picked up by my Lyft driver. Her name was Carla. Carla was an African-American woman, middle-aged, was an executive at a company. She asked me what I was doing there. I'm teaching salary negotiation classes in Nashville. She's in Nashville. And she said, oh, awesome. I used to work for a company, and I found out that my white male coworker was making 3 times my salary. And because I brought it up to HR and said, hey, this is an issue, can we have more pay transparency? The next day she was fired. She has 3 kids, an MBA, right? And she's driving Uber because she needs to get the funding that she needs to start her consulting business, right? That pissed me off so much. And this is a narrative across the US, not just Seattle, like across the US, especially the South. So I think for me, besides Carla's story and then my story here in Seattle, is that there needs to be a change. There are people of color in Seattle, in the greater Seattle area, but we're not giving the access that they need, or we're not going to the communities that they need to see the things that we are supposed to, like, that we're sharing. Majority, if you're a POC and you're working in Seattle, whatever, Seattle proper, you're making at least $75K and up. And that is like what is our average income right now? Like 95, 100 something? Like, what is it? 70K.
Can I just note that I think in Seattle, I think 70,000 is considered
median.
Yeah. It's not, you're
level.
eligible for, I think, like housing, like affordable housing.
Yeah.
Like that's sad.
It's crazy. And I was tired of seeing all this, and I'm tired of women of color being underutilized, underpaid, and undercompensated. So like all that good stuff. So that was the moment when I decided to start my community. And we can do it. Like, I'm tired of Wind of Color not getting beautiful spaces, not showing the art, the music. If I had to go to another hip hop freaking like a cafe that was playing hip hop and there's no POCs, I'm gonna fucking blow my brain. It's like, what the fuck? Like that is and that's Capitol Hill, right?
Mhm.
Like the fact that they're playing our music, like whether it's like Latin music or it's hip hop or rap or any kind of genre, jazz, but we're not in those spaces. It's really, really, really. I mean, even like when you go to Central District, there's African American art everywhere, but like, you know what I mean? Like everyone's being pushed out. So I think it's really frustrating to see. I mean, I'm not even from here, and I understand what it means as a native Hawaiian. I understand what it means when people are coming into your city and completely like decimating it, right? And seeing the relics of your people's art, your culture, everything you built your entire life for. So that's when I decided to create my community because I knew we deserve better. We deserve better treatment, better pay, and also live full lives with all the complexities and intersectional identities. Like, yeah, we can be in tech, but I also could turn up on a club. I can go to the bars. I can also like be an introvert and just put my face mask on and have my candles. You know, like we all can do these things and also do well. And how can we as community leaders build that space where you're valued?
Yeah.
All right. So mine is around fashion specifically. I guess right before I moved here, one of the reasons why I decided to move here is because I saw that there was no community around men's fashion. Like there was, so I guess context, I was a fashion blogger on the side. It was like a side hustle of mine down in LA. And I was in a community in LA and it's saturated down there. So I got involved and met a lot of people in that space. And my parents were living here at the time. They still live here. But back then I was coming on holidays and there was just no fashion scene up here. So it was just like, for me, it was important because I love fashion, right? So I was like, let me see if I can maybe move up there, be a big fish in a small pond and like make some kind of something happen, like get people started talking about it. So no one was doing it. So it was actually like kind of easy, to be honest, because no one was doing it. So
That's
start.
That's a good point because a lot of people, they get caught up in the whole, well, I'm starting something right now, and probably after 1 year, they want to kind of move to that metropolitan city that has so many people doing the exact same thing. So this is a good place to build, man. So,
but there about that though. So a city like LA is very challenging because it's competitive, saturated. Seattle, there's not as much competition, so it's easier to stand out. But what I've discovered, I'm still trying to figure things out, is that I think there's some kind of cap or level in Seattle. But in a city like LA or New York, there's so much more opportunity for you to really grow. You just have to hustle way harder. It's harder, but you can make it, I think, so much further than somewhere like Seattle for fashion specifically.
Yeah. I think sometimes it's also where you kind of have this balance of whether I can live in Seattle still and just like fly frequently to different places where the opportunities exist, or I could just move to that city and then kind of just already just be a part of the communities that I need to be a part of. So, but flying back and forth, it gets expensive unless you got the business paying for you,
Yeah, that, or you got to set up community leaders and scale. If you want to scale, you have to have people do it for you.
Yeah.
Delegate.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely. Yeah. And that's dope that each and one of you guys got people that kind of help be able to make those things happen. I'm going to move a little forward because I got to move a little bit forward because we still got like 30 minutes left. I want to get through a lot of stuff. So this is one of the thoughtful questions. This is based off of community building competition. Do you ever feel like you're in competition with other community builders? Is it really a numbers game when it comes down to events? I know sometimes people are kind of like, if the numbers aren't right, or we don't have enough people here, but this person got way more people coming to their events versus mine. I got to figure out how I can do certain things. Is there any competition, or do you guys ever feel like you're in competition with other people?
Never.
Never. Okay, that's good.
Well,
that's good.
So I'm of the religion that everybody eats, and I think there is, and he hit it right on the head. Like there's enough opportunity for everyone, especially in a city like Seattle, and even better if we can all collaborate and join forces and combine efforts. Then everybody wins, everybody builds their profile, everybody has a unique offering, everybody adds something different. And if we focus on kind of like mutually beneficial relationships, and I was going to bring that up with the networking thing, like your networking should be focused on mutually beneficial scenarios. Like you should look, how are you adding value and how are they adding value to you? And we should approach the same thing with collaborations. Like if you have a community, somebody has a similar community, you're not doing the exact same thing. And even if you think you are, you offer something different to people. And if you collaborate and you bring the best of both worlds, 4 worlds, 5 worlds, whatever, then you learn from each other, you help elevate each other's profile, you help make the community more useful for the other people. So now they're finding about a whole nother community. So now they look at you as like, because of this community, I found this community, which is actually my true community. So you can't, if you look at everything as a competition, or better yet, a zero-sum game, then you're kind of limiting your own success. But if you look at collaboration as a means to, or a positive sum endeavor where value can be created, then it's not only better for yourself, but it's better for the members of your community, and it's better for your partners or collaborators or whoever you see as your competition.
And also, by the way, I wanted to make sure that we don't always have to go this exact way. So feel free, like if you feel, okay, I'm just letting you guys know, just whenever you guys want to talk. Yeah.
Well, now I feel like I shouldn't go.
Well, I mean, like anybody that want to say something before,
I think I kind of touched on it before, especially with Ben, is that we partner with other companies. We partner with other companies maybe 2 or 3 times a year, and we enjoy doing it. So if people reach out to us, as long as our ask isn't too wild, we usually are open to it. So like Boeing is hosting something this year for the holidays, and we're like, okay, we'll make sure that we tap into that, make sure we contribute to it. I also think about, like, was it yesterday? I sat down with another company and they're like, hey, we spun up our ERG. Can you guys give us some feedback? And it was myself and 2 other people from the Ben board. It was like, hey, here's how we started. Here's things that we've learned. Here's our current challenges. Here's how we think that you guys can overcome those. And how I not take those learnings. And they actually had some things that they were telling us. They were like, oh my gosh, that's a really great idea. Even internally, there's so many different affinity groups within. So like, how can we learn from Latinos at, how can we learn from women's at? And they have multiple chapters, because there's way more women at tech companies than like people of color. So how can we learn and scale the things that they're doing? So it's all about learning from each other. I think also, to Anthony's point, when it comes to community building, is that even if you think that you're putting on similar events, there's also different people who go to those events. So how can you introduce those people to each other? So I think about the Collective and Laid Back Allure. Those are both really cool events, but I feel like if Anthony put it on, they probably had something similar, probably have different audience, and if you put on something that Anthony had. But if you guys collaborate together, now it's a whole different group of people who get to meet with each other.
Yeah. And we have.
There we go. So I think that there's opportunity for us to bring our communities together, and you shouldn't be worried about necessarily competition, but it's how you build the community and continue to network and build and grow, and you shouldn't be afraid of that.
Oh man, I think with this is like understanding that that is such an archaic way of thinking. You know what I mean? We're living in a time that's such a white collarist like fucking way of thinking, right? Let's be real. And I think the number one is that like we are pinned, especially if you're person of color, right? That there's scarcity mindset, right? And everybody heard of growth mindset. Is that we work together, we collaborate as a collective, we all grow together, right? And I think that's the biggest takeaway, is that, we are put in a system and a society where we can only be the only one. I'm the only, win of color organization out there. We're going to be the best, because that's a capitalist mindset, right? You want to swallow everything else. There's no competition. I think we are going into an era where it's more about brand mission, what are your values, but also how do we collectively, raise the tide for all ships to rise, right? Like, as corny as that might sound, but like, I think number one is like, as people of color, as communities, we need to really think about how can we start creating allyship and being co-conspirators with one another. Like, for instance, when we had our launch party in January of this year, we had 300 plus people of color and our allies on Capitol Hill in a tight ass space. I made it a very cognizant, I made a point to honor other POC leaders as like an awards. I honored like Anthony Kerr here. People who have done the work before myself, to understand that I recognize the work that you've done, because the work that we do is like, you don't get recognized for putting on like these really like elaborate events. You kind of don't. You kind of do on yourself, but you kind of don't.
Yeah.
And I think it's really smart to be thinking about how do we move away from the crabs in the bucket mentality of like, let's pull each other down to get to the top. Like, we really need to start collaborating together. I mean, even when I talk about my company, my demographic is women of color. That is such a blanketed statement. It's for women of color from all races, non-binary, trans women of color. But also, this is a platform for allies to come and have this discussion, like an educational platform for you to learn about the experiences of women of color in the workplace. So I think for this, is really, it's such an important part when you have that sense of jealousy coming up, like they sold out their event before me, all these influencers are going to it, blah blah blah. It's like, think about it a way as an opportunity, right? Like, wow, they did this great, so I'm gonna do it even better, right? But also understanding is like, put out an olive branch, right? Like, learn from each other. I think that's the number one. Being mixed race is that's kind of what I grew up learning, is that you have to go into different communities and learn the best.
I'll keep this one short. For me, no, there's no other men's fashion community in Seattle. So
zero competition.
You're in a good space. That's what I'm talking about. So we got about like 15 minutes. So I kind of I might skip through a few things, but I don't want to skip the spicy stuff. So this question is particularly for the women, and after the women answer, the guys are more than welcome to answer these questions. But this is based off, women are more hesitant to ask for a connection for anything, often out of fear of being perceived as an opportunist or even weak. That's a quote that I found online. But for those that be able to,
what's the source?
I think it was on an article at Fast Company or something like that. Based off of this was based off an article of why women. I think it was why women. It's harder for women to network or something like that. That was something that they had brought up. So that's the reason I put it in bold. But basically, for the women, what has been your method on networking and building community with men? One of the things that I saw also when I was researching was that women usually prefer to, when they want to meet with men for networking purposes, they prefer like the coffee meetups, or they prefer brunch versus having happy hour or going for dinner, because it may turn into something that'd be a little bit more intimate. So for you guys, or your perspective, what is it that you guys do in order to be able to network with men without those hidden agendas?
Oh God, we're like.
Hey, it's a real question.
Well,
right?
I think that's false. I think we're living in a time that there's a new generation of women who are fearless. We as women are hit with a double bind. So double bind means that you will be knocked down for being outside of the social status of being a woman, being like you're not, you're not asking for a lot. Like if you're acting like a man, then you're being docked. For instance, Hillary Clinton, right? So she was seen as an opportunist. The way that she was characterized. Because she's a woman, right? I think when it comes to business, yes, we live in a time where sexism, sexual, like all that stuff, right? Like I also don't want to trigger anybody today, because it's true. I mean, the threat, right, is huge. It is real for women. It's unfortunate, but luckily we're in a time where these issues are being brought up. For instance, I'm fundraising, right? So if you are talking to VCs, angel investors, they're predominantly white men. And when you are asking for money, it seems like a dance. It is literally a fucking pony show of, why are you going to need my money? How are you going to show up? Blah, 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 blah. And women of color are 5 times as less to get funding than anybody else. So I think when it comes to, I think women are excellent excellent at building community, excellent at networking. How can we network with more men is that, for us, it's that men really need to do the work of educating themselves, being more open, because women are open to talking to men. Like, because we have code switched. I mean, women of color are number one, intersectional identities. Not only are you a woman, but you're also like are on your race. So code switching, we've done this since we were freaking 12. So we know how to talk to men, and we have to learn how to talk to women. So I think, it's not our job to make people feel comfortable. It's everybody else to feel like comfortable to talk to us. And I don't, I live I preach what I say. It's like I approached you guys, right? And we talked about collaboration. How do I show up for you guys? Yeah. And how is that reciprocated like for me, right? Like, how do you guys show up for me? I think the fear is now are gone. More women are mentoring women too. So I don't think I don't know. There's a lot of concern, but I think women are going out for it now. Like because there's no other option. Men have the money right now. Like that is just a fact. Yep. And we are figuring out ways of how to prove ourselves and interact with the other sex. Like it's how it is.
Absolutely. Well,
yeah, that's interesting.
Well, I'm actually, I don't want you guys to think I'm rude. I'm actually looking because I bookmarked all these things.
Yes,
so
please let me know.
So I'm looking back at the.
I feel like I have so many thoughts. I think one, to the point of women typically, do you want to have like coffee or brunch? I know I personally, whenever I want to like meet with someone, I'm like, yeah, do you want to go get coffee? I don't really say happy hour because then it's kind of like, is she using that as like you want to go at happy hour? Like, no, I really want to talk to you about some things. Yeah. And I went to have happy hour with someone and had that issue of they're like, oh yeah, so like, what are you into? And then I'm like, that's not what this is for. Yeah. So, but I also, in that same vein, whenever I meet with anybody, if it's supposed to be about business, then I want to have coffee or I want to sit in a more professional setting. So I guess at the same time, I don't think that much into it. As far as asking people for anything, I feel like I grew up with just being told that you don't ask anybody for anything. Like you don't need people for stuff. So I don't think about it from a male's perspective or a women's perspective. I don't typically ask people for anything unless I truly need it. And even then, I'm probably just going to try to figure it out on my own. So I commend you because I feel like me having to go get funding would be so difficult. And I think that's just my personality. So again, I don't think about it from a male or female perspective. And so that I think this last point that you made is understanding that working in tech is dominated by men. So I can't be scared to go talk to men. Like I have to. If not, I'm not going to progress in my career. Literally all of my skip levels and everybody up like VP wise, they are men. Most of them are white men. So if I don't feel comfortable with talking to them and presenting in front of them, I'm not going to get anywhere. So it's making sure that you feel comfortable. I think it's the biggest thing that I think women just have to be overall is being comfortable and confident in yourself. I have found that when I need to talk to vendors when I first started working, I have people who didn't want to talk to me or feel like I wasn't educated enough. And it's being confident and being like, you to talk to me, you're going to talk to anybody. And I think that in general is something that women have to do. Black women, for sure, women of color, we have to be confident because they don't expect us to be educated or think that we got to where we are by chance or a friend of action. And that's not the case. So I don't really think, in my opinion, I think that's bogus. And I think in general, it's just how do you talk to people, period.
Good. That's good. I think I have the article. I just, once I finalize it, people are always be and stuff. I think it's like on INC. I was looking.
It's real. It's real. But I think as women of color, we're just like we can't relate because we're so excellent. We build our reputation so well. Is that when I talk to a man, I'm like, yeah, you're not gonna fuck with me because you know who I am.
I'm talking about.
You know what I mean? So
I don't disagree that you probably found it somewhere. I just want to know who wrote it.
Yeah, once I find out, I'll show you. I kept the tabs all open. I should have just put the source on there, but it's all good though. This is for the men. Now this just pertains to just events in general, but sometimes the success of an event put together by men is determined by the amount of women that attend. Oftentimes, women don't feel comfortable networking amongst a group of men due to the potential of hidden intentions. So what are men doing in the community that you're building to make sure that women feel included for the right reasons, yet also feel safe?
All right. I guess I'll take this one. I feel like our organization and community is focused on men's fashion specifically, but the community itself is consisted of pretty much equal parts of men and women. I think it comes down to messaging and branding. And I mean, we're really heavy on social media, so we use a lot of social media content. So I guess it really depends on the messaging of your community and how your community perceives it. Yeah. One big thing also is that although and this actually has to do with just fashion in Seattle in general, you have a lot of guys who are looking to step up their game, but you also have a lot of women who they want their husband or their boyfriend to step up their game too. So like they're kind of interested in our content. So it kind of like speaks to more than just one specific. It's also for people who just already love fashion and need to go somewhere to dress up. Yeah. So I think it just comes down to how you market yourself.
Yeah. So since the collective is more than 60% women, like we have to take let's say special care to make sure people are not being reckless. And so for instance, we've had to kick people out of group chats and remove them from email lists and block them from Slack channels so that they were not in a position or they would discontinue harassing someone. And that's typically not something I say out in public or let people know, but we, at least in virtual instances, there's a number of actions that you can take to ensure that people do not have a pathway to be disrespectful or otherwise inappropriate. And that's, you can only operate within the world that you know of. So I'm sure there's somebody texting someone that I can't do anything about. In physical settings, our events are generally mostly women, so we don't have a lot of like in-person problems, but again, like I think there has not been a single collective event that did not involve a collaboration with a woman. So whether it be the day parties, the brunches, the poetry shows, spin class, every single event that we've done has been in collaboration with a woman. And I'm mindful of that because the community is mostly women. So we have to make sure that we get that perspective every time.
Yeah, and there's like a conduct of behavior that most, like an established community has, like a conduct of behavior. Like you promise before entering this community, you sign a contract saying you're going to be acting such way, you know, verbal abusive like behavior is going to be, that means you're out, etc. I mean, what's happening at the UCLA fraternities is that before anybody enters into a frat party, the person at the door is saying, if you see anything that is inappropriate or somebody's not giving consent, you must say something about it and make people pledge before they get into the room. So new generation is really redefining how we see safety for women, but also how do we create intentional spaces of community where everyone feels like they can be themselves, their full selves, and feel like they can participate. Just a little.
Absolutely. All right, we got like 2 more slides. We got about 5 minutes left, so we'll try to. So the random question was, what is the most stressful thing you've had to encounter while planning, during, or after a community-based event, and how did you? Wow, I didn't even finish the slide. Wow. How did you overcome that stressful situation? That's so embarrassing. Wow. Yeah, whatever you do, don't take a picture of this, all right, please. Don't take a picture of it, please. Oh, man. Okay.
I don't experience a whole lot of stress with the events, except when people wait to the day before to buy tickets.
Yeah.
Or RSVP, and that's like, all right, I owe people money now, and yeah, like I'm getting nervous about, but it always works out, because we haven't had an event this year that hasn't sold out, but sometimes it sells out the day before the event, but sometimes it starts selling the day before the event, but like the reason we do this isn't necessarily primarily for financial gain. It's because we enjoy doing this and we love the communities that we're a part of. So the stress is a different kind of stress, and it's not necessarily a bad stress. But yeah, that's all I got.
Most stressful situation was that I put on, it's called the Future for Us Assembly, which brought out 300 plus women of color professionals for like a conference geared for us. So it's geared for us. So legally, you can't say this is only for women of color. It's illegal. So for us is that we intentionally put that space for us because we are marginalized folks, the spaces that are intentionally only for a group. So we encountered halfway through the event, we had colleagues of a speaker come through, about probably 8 of them, and they were her white colleagues. They didn't purchase a ticket. They wanted to show up, and I mean, this is like $300 a pop, right, for a ticket, and they decided to come and show up for her, for like their colleague, their coworker, etc. And for us, it's that when you build, I mean, this is very controversial. This happens every time in Seattle. If you have an intentional community, and you know these are spaces, I as a co-founder who's running around the space, having to tell 8 young white colleagues who intentionally were just trying to support their co-founder, telling them, hey, like, love that you guys are here. Just telling you as the owner of this business, you guys didn't purchase a ticket, number 1. Number 2, I want you guys just to recognize the space that you're in. What space that you're holding and take away from the people who showed up for this and bought a ticket. And this is geared for these people. So I want you to know, as you know, people who don't come from a marginalized identities, to like, if you are here to support, that you will have to sit in the back and kind of take in what does that look like? What does that look like? So really to tell young white folks about privilege and what that looks like in about 5 minutes. And also what does it mean to like take up space, you being there is taking up space and taking away from other folks. But also, you know, what does it mean to be, if, for instance, if I go to a predominantly Black event, I'm not Black, right? But I intentionally make sure that I'm not, you know, I'm not the first one asking a question. You know, if somebody wants to go somewhere, I'm the last in line. You know, like I make sure that I don't take the space of an intentionally built space for a particular group. So when you have to teach that in 5 minutes to 8 folks who are, you know, clearly outside of that space, that was probably the most stressful situation that I had to deal with, because that equals, I mean, they could sue, right? They could definitely sue if it's, you know, I don't know, I have no bounds with these kind of things happening. But also understanding that like language is so important, and teaching people about that's what intentional spaces look like. And I think when we're building our communities, being really cognizant of that. And, you know, if you're building for a specific group and then having to talk to other people who are well-intentioned, it's a hard thing, because I worked for a national women's organization called Ladies Get Paid, which has 40,000 women across country. And they were only putting on events for only women. And they said that in the event, they were sued by a men's rights organization for $100,000. And this is a 2 women like founded company, and they were slammed with a $100K lawsuit because they said this is a women only event. I'm sure some of you guys already seen events that says women only or men, like whatever, right? There's men's clubs, historically men's club only clubs, right? So when you're a business owner, you really need to understand the legalities of language, and also what spaces are you creating, what communities you're spacing, and understand the nuances, and get a fucking advisory board with somebody with a legal. That's really, really smart.
Yeah.
That's really, really smart. We're fine.
I'm happy that worked out. Yeah. I think the most stressful events are usually the ones where we are doing something for the very first time. So things like the holiday party or the gala, but then also having events that are internal and external. Because one, we've never done it before, so how do you have this proof of concept? But then if you, one, don't execute properly, that looks bad, not just on the organization, but the company. So whenever we have these events that have external people, I always have to think about, one, what is the outcome that we're trying to have? How does Ben look? Because whatever I do, my actions are, they're going to reflect the rest of the entire community. But then also I think about a sense from an Amazon perspective. And it's making sure that even when people are in our space, making sure that they're not doing certain things in Amazon buildings. So it's so stressful because I have to make sure that our event is successful, people are safe, people are doing things within reason. We want people to have fun, because all that's going to come back on the company. And I want people to have fun, and then I want to have fun, but I have to figure out that happy medium of like, oh, I want to have fun and turn it with my friends. Everybody's just, having a good time. But again, I have to take a step back and remember that I still have to be in this professional setting, and it's super stressful. When you want us to have these events, and those events cost money, what are the results that you're going to show for them so that I can make sure we continue to have these type of events? Because if we say, oh, we need X, Y, and Z, I want to have this event, and people don't show up or something bad happens, we probably can't have that event anymore. So those are the things that stresses me out the most, is like, well, people show up, what will happen during it, and what's the feedback they're going to get after it, just not from a Ben perspective or from an Angelina perspective of our board, but how does that also trickle down to the people externally? So that's the one of the big stressful things. But then also our community is very, very vocal. So we have an email list, and if we do something, it's all in the email. Like, wow, I can't believe they did this. Oh, it sold out. What about us? We work here. And those are things that we have to also think about. So I'm always like, okay, literally when we were putting together our email communication, they're like, okay, we're going to hit send. I'm like, it's going to be fine. Literally Kim in the back, she's like, yeah. But those are things that I would say stresses me out the most, is when you have these external events that's more publicized and it's more at risk. But I also make sure that I don't let that fear stop us from doing those type of things.
You got one more, right? I can take the next one.
Take the next question. Okay, cool, yeah. All right, a subjective question. Not being from Seattle, do you think your community would have thrived the way it has back home?
Let me take a minute. Someone can go. Let me take a minute to think about this one.
I think for me, I'll go ahead and jump in. I think for me, kinda, maybe. I think at first when I was doing what I'm doing now back in Atlanta, it was less of a collective, more of a personal thing. So it was more about me hosting events personally and being in these spaces that allowed me to kind of like MC or put these events together myself. And then I guess when I moved to Seattle, that's when I was able to kind of create a team that kind of helped me scale things, more of having just hands-on to put people in the right position to kind of like help me execute this vision. So I think I could say both, because maybe back in Atlanta I didn't have as much help, but moving to Seattle I have definitely way more help. That's somebody texting me, sorry. They like, yeah, wrap it up. But yeah, that's what I think. I think being in Seattle and creating a community in Seattle helped, and I don't think it would have thrived the way it has being here versus in Atlanta. But I think Atlanta was still a great space for me to kind of like start and build that foundation and then bring it over here. So.
Okay, so for me, I don't think mine would have thrived as well. I think. So I'm from Los Angeles originally. I think it wouldn't have thrived as well there as here, because of what I said earlier about the big fish in a small pond type thing. It just would have been way harder and would have taken way more resources. I think your social media following and your brand really does matter. And just being in fashion in LA, like everyone has lots of followers, and I think that's like all that kind of matters down there for businesses and brands. So it just would have been harder. Here, it's a lot more authentic, and people are more, I feel like in some way, people are more real here. So it just, would have been way harder in LA.
I'm from an island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. So we women of color, especially Hawaiian women, need this community. But the way that we were able to grow and scale in 11 months to 7,000 community members, but also to do a road show in 7 cities. Like, there's no access, right? Like, we are in a city that's also a tier 2 city that's growing. So that's, if you're trying to grow a community in this audience, like this is a prime time spot, because not only do you have resources to big money, as in like Microsoft money, Amazon money. So like they're more risk adverse in terms of investment or sponsorship. But once you get in, it's easier. Venues are way more I'd say open to sponsoring, etc. There's more resources here. So yeah, that's my answer.
I would say yes. So when I think about home, I'm thinking about Denver, and Denver is having the She's like, what? Yes, there are people of color in Denver.
I did a thing there, and it was like probably our most explosive like show there. So yeah.
Yeah. I think Denver is having the same type of evolution as Seattle. So I would say definitely, I see so many of my friends, people that I went to high school with and college, and they're having their own like side hustles. So I feel like the things that we're doing in Seattle, I'm seeing them do the same things in Denver. So I could definitely see what's happening in Seattle happen in Denver for sure.
So short answer is yes, but not to get too deep into 9-to-5 stuff, marketing. So every community can thrive everywhere. So when we think about the definition of a community, finding people with shared values, shared goals, etc. And all you really need is just a niche that's not being fulfilled at all or not being fulfilled in a way that it should. So if you're able to execute on this, then your community can thrive anywhere. If you're trying to replicate something exactly how it's being done, then that's a different story. But as long as you find the people that all have this kind of same lifestyle, this same, or maybe just say like-minded people, then you can thrive. And since I was talking about people, I guess I'll shout out like people in the audience that have helped the collective thrive. Starting with Muhammad in the back, partner in crime and creating the experiences. Ishmael, who was actually the reason for our first corporate sponsored event. Ishmael's the plug.
Yes, sir.
Janae's the future plug.
Yes, sir.
And Makita actually is creating in Denver. And I had a little cousin that moved to Denver, didn't know nobody. Plugged her into Makita's group. And now she's like in the mix and she feels like she has a home. So I'm proud of that. But yeah, like if you find the people, you can build anything. But the key is just finding the people, make them believe, and fulfill a need that is not being fulfilled at all or is minimally being fulfilled.
You guys have seen Jerry's finger before. I usually plug this. I usually have this at the last of each one of my panels, just for the final thought, final moment. Community is everywhere, ladies and gentlemen. I believe that if you're networking, you guys, I got something really serious to say. You have to do that. Community. So community is everywhere. I give credit to Seattle for allowing me to be able to build an amazing community. I give credit to Seattle for allowing me to meet people like you guys and also people here that have built communities all over. I believe that if you're networking for the right reasons and there's intention and there's purpose and value behind each person that you're connecting with, it can be fairly simple for anybody to grow a community in Seattle. So definitely take advantage of joining either one of these people's communities if you aren't a part of it already, because they're doing a lot of amazing stuff. You can follow them all on social media. I got it all their stuff on the Eventbrite and everything. Yeah, that's all I have to say. So not only does this conclude today's panel, but this concludes the entire It's All Subjective series panel discussion. So, I put the... Put the wrong thing. Wow. But anyways, this concludes everything. We're good. The last of it all. Yeah. You guys have any other questions? There's a video. There's gonna be video for. No, there's no video. I usually just like to have it. Yeah, that's exactly why. I love Jerry's figure. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate you guys being here. This ends it. Like I said, you guys will be able to stream this whole thing through YouTube and also through my podcast, Cognac Small Talk. Follow it on Spotify and all that good stuff. So yeah, thank you guys. Yeah, that's it. That's it.